Greetings, Race community. Brent coming in live with today's guest, Jen Howe, who is the Vice President of University Advancement at the University of Dayton. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you, Brent. It's great to be here.
So we were just catching up on the fact that last weekend you had your first reunion experience in some time. And so we're going to make sure to dive into that. It sounds like it was energizing and exhausting at the same time. But before we get there, I would love to just learn a little bit more about your personal higher education journey. So take me back to Jen in high school. Who was she and what led her to JMU?
Yeah, so I was a senior in high school in Fairfax County, Virginia, and in fact had moved there 2 weeks into my senior year. So I had a graduating class of almost 1,000 kids, and I knew about 10. And my dad's job had taken us up there. And so for me, I had come from the Southeast US, had probably always thought I would go to a school in the Southeast. And all of a sudden I found myself in a very different setting. And so JMU really had a great feel to it. At the time, it's about 11,500 students. So it was more like a private university because we all knew each other. It was a really small size, very residential, and it was just far enough from mom and dad to be cool, but also be able to get to them. I mean, like most college students. So that was me then. Haven't changed a lot. I loved books and writing and interacting with people and didn't know exactly how that would turn into a career. I think my dad thought business or law. I went English history route and, graduated there and then went into marketing and sales
And so you studied English language and literature, is my understanding. So what is one aspect of English language and or literature that we should all probably better know or be familiar with than we are?
I would say the most valuable thing to me has been kind of the critical, if you want to call it the critical theory, when you read something that as an English major, you were asked to apply no matter what genre or time frame of literature you were reading, because it really hones your comprehension skills. And so I think one of the things that makes us successful later on is our ability to hear and see things that may not be topics that we're really familiar with, but the fact that we can really slow down and actually look at them, ask the right questions, be more critical about what we're seeing on the page or on the screen. I think that's kind of how it's translated for me. I think the other thing is, I would say to anybody, take a persuasive writing course. That has served me better than anything I've ever done, is actually, knowing how to write with a sense of passion and persuasion. That has served me whether I've been in the private sector or higher ed.
I don't know if it was exactly a persuasive writing class, but I'll never forget this class I took in college. And I wrote this paper, and I was the writer that would constantly write, I think ... or I feel ... And I remember the first time I got the paper back from that professor, it was just like all crossed out, like, of course you think and feel this way. It's your paper. Stop writing those. And I've never forgotten, to this day, when I write an email, and I try not to write I think or I feel, because it's a given. That's all I got for persuasive writing.
That's good.
So while at JMU, in spite of that sort of unique high school experience of being dropped into a big pond with not much time to get to know the other fish, it looks like you were pretty involved from a leadership perspective at JMU. During that period, did you know what alumni relations and development was? Did you ever get a window into that part of the world through your student leadership?
It's funny. I really didn't. And I think at that point in time, JMU was kind of this smaller, somewhat emerging institution. You have this big, schools like UVA and Virginia Tech and William and Mary, who had these very steeped histories. They had formal alumni associations. They used those networks for placement on internships and career placement and so forth. And Madison wasn't there yet, right? And so there was very little interaction. So I didn't really have a sense of it actually until I graduated. And the reason I say that is because so many graduates of the JMU University stay in that Washington, D.C. metro area that was the point where I realized, oh, wait a second, there's this whole network of people, and the university supports that kind of conversation and that kind of thing. So, that has stuck with me. So now in my current work, one of the biggest things I focus on is the activity that we do with our undergraduate students and our professional students while they're here on campus, so that they know we exist long before they leave us, right? Before they graduate and go on or what have you. But yeah, I probably didn't figure out really what all that was and what it could mean to me till probably 18 to 24 months out, from graduation.
And so you said that you went into marketing and sales out of school. Tell me more about those early roles.
Yeah. So for like the first 6 years after graduation, first in the DC area and then in the Raleigh-Durham area, I was kind of what they called a new business marketing analyst kind of person or what have you. And worked in commercial real estate and then an architecture engineering firm in North Carolina. And they were great proving grounds in the sense that, you had to learn customer service skills. Again, you had to have high-end communication skills, a lot of follow through. And you had to be able to walk in and kind of like in fundraising and talk to a brick wall, right? You walk into a room, not know anybody and be able to kind of hold your own. And it was a great experience. You get to learn how to hear no and not take it personally, which is also important when you move into, fundraising and so forth. And so it was good. It was fast paced. It was very much time is money. And so it was a good orientation to really kind of, prime myself, so that when I made the shift, I brought kind of a skill set that was a little different maybe than if I'd come up through higher ed only.
What was the catalyst for you to move to Atlanta and join Emory?
So my husband actually, he changed professions and we moved to Atlanta, which is actually where I was born. So it was kind of like going back home and anything. And I really had reached a point where maybe charging every 6 minutes to a client's number just didn't feel like what I wanted to do the rest of my life, right? And anything. And so I kind of said to my mom at the time, I'm trying to figure out what to do. And this is what I enjoy the most. And this is what I don't enjoy. And her comment to me, because she was working at Georgetown University in DC at the time, was, well, why don't you try actually representing something you've always cared about and enjoyed? And that's education. It was probably the best advice she ever gave me. She gave me a lot of good advice, but that was probably one of the best pieces. And so I really started looking at positions across the whole Atlanta metro area and got really fortunate to be hired by the provost office at Emory University to be a special projects manager for a brand new provost that they had just promoted. And it was a eagle eye view of how university works, in the shared governance model and all those kind of things that you kind of have to know when you're a fundraiser. But maybe if you aren't in the middle of it, you don't learn, right? And so it was really great to kind of be a part of that first and then move into fundraising after about a year and a half.
So you had a window into fundraising by way of the provost's office. And I'd be curious to know, what was like the reputation of fundraising when you're in the provost's office? Was there a tight partnership? Was it sort of there over there? I mean, what was your initial impression of the intersection of fundraising and the broader academic apparatus?
Yeah. So I probably have had what I'm going to call atypical experience to my other peers that might be listening. I've been at 3 different institutions where the academic arm is literally walking hand in glove with the advancement operation. I have plenty of colleagues who talk about the disconnect, right? Whether it's because of the way they're structured or just the way the division is led or what have you, where advancement's kind of over here doing what they do, and they'll let you know when they raise some money. And then academics kind of constantly think, well, you're not hearing what I really need. And hey, I've got a budget gap I want you to fill, that kind of thing. And they're kind of cross talking each other. I was really fortunate because, Emory is completely centralized, or was at least at the time, advancement wise. And it was very clear that, we were going to really follow the academic priorities that the provost along with the deans had set, right? We're coming out of a campaign, really needed to regain momentum, after kind of going through that wave of last donors and so forth. And so we needed something that was very concise, very compelling, and in many ways would have an impact across the entire institution versus just discrete parts of it. So that was kind of my first exposure. And, and then when I arrived at Vanderbilt, Gordon Gee was leading basically a centralization and strategic effort to bring the academic side of the house, the finance side of the house, and then advancement basically into direct parallel with one another. And they had kind of been operating separately. And so it was, again, like I say, it's been interesting that 3 different institutions, but I've had the same experience at all 3.
So yesterday, I had the opportunity to interview Cindy Roth for the podcast, who is the CEO of the West Virginia Foundation, whose current president is Gordon Gee. And so I got a good dose of Gordon Gee yesterday. When I applied to Brown University, where I went to college, he was the president at Brown. So it's been a very interesting 2 days of Gordon Gee reconnection, which I might press on here in a minute.
Sure.
And then I also hosted Dan Allenby recently on the podcast, who is a JMU graduate. And so we were just talking a little JMU. But when you think about that transition at Emory from the provost into development, and you think about even some of those like first visits or, I don't know, memorable experiences where you had been operating in the more traditional sort of sales-driven world, I would argue there are huge parallels to the sector, but there are also some real nuances. And then I bet the folks you were working with from a commercial real estate perspective or from an architecture perspective didn't have some pre-existing brand affinity with your organizations at the time, right? So they were all probably very cold leads relative to the portfolio you might have been assigned at Emory. So just walk me through some of those early moments when you, I don't know, visits that stand out, or you started to think, hey, this is fun.
Yeah. So my first job at the big job that I had at Emory was around foundations and international relations. So I had the great joy of working with the organizations that had very formal structures to them, right? Private foundations want you to communicate, engage with them, solicit them in a very specific way. And then
so it's more like working an account versus the relationship.
Right. Yeah. And then on the international front, we were trying to really set up the first round of kind of alumni chapters and direct fundraising and so forth for the school. And so I got the best of both worlds. So, one of my favorite pieces was actually, there's a part of Emory that's called Oxford College. It's its first 2 years or what have you. And working with one of the private foundations there in the Atlanta area, we were able to secure about I think it was $1.25 million, for a facility. And that was like my very first, like really big gift. And it was huge because this particular foundation requires you to only submit 1 page. That's it. It doesn't matter how much money you're asking for. 1 page. They've got like 7 questions they want answered. You're trying to figure out a way to make it super compelling. And they even tell you what your margins have to be, right? It's not like you can take it down to 0.25 on the top and the bottom.
I also used that trick in the class I was referencing.
So that was really huge because I was so excited that the supervisor I had at the time decided that he was going to give that particular solicitation assignment to me. And it was just, it was kind of one of those things that was like really magic, right? Because I could learn the content. And then to my point earlier, I had to take my persuasive writing skills after meeting with the program officer to understand the expectations of the submission. And like, I've got to figure out how, in basically 4 paragraphs on 1 page, to get you to make $1 million plus gift, and they had a relationship with the university. So that was helpful. But like you said, I mean, they answer to a set of stakeholders in their own board and everything else. They're looking for the best idea and the best opportunity that matches their desired objectives, right? Not yours. And so that was a real thrill to kind of like go through that process for the very first time and see that come through. Obviously the first time you close like a scholarship gift from somebody abroad to bring someone who wouldn't be here, that's important too. But that was like the first big assignment that I got that went the right way. There were plenty that didn't go as well, but you're going to have those, so.
Doesn't it sort of make you wish that you always had to fit it onto 1 page with 7 questions? I mean, there's probably something to learn from that. And, even as we think about, we're going through a strategy planning session right now where, mission, vision, values, 5-year plan, 3-year target, 1-year goals. And the process that we are using literally makes you put it all on one sheet of paper,
Right.
one piece of paper that everybody can reference constantly. And there's no room for fluff when you have those sorts of constraints, and probably something that we can all learn from for sure. You said that you had plenty that didn't go the right way. I think it's been really fun as we've had leaders like you join this podcast who've been willing to share,
Mhm.
the blooper reel, if you will, as well. I am curious, when you think about times that you've maybe asked for too much money or not enough money, or just position things the wrong way, if anything comes to mind as being a lesson learned.
I think the lessons that I've learned, and I've had a couple of gifts and anything that have had this characteristic, is where we, as a team, the academic side of the house and the advancement side of the house, we were so focused on getting the solicitation perfect that we lost the moment. The timing was off. And so what do I mean? Donors do things out of passion and impact, right? And so when you have a conversation with somebody about a really transformative gift, and they're excited about it, but they really don't know exactly what it looks like, or how you'll execute it, or that type of thing. The challenge for us is those are usually big ideas that involve multiple areas of our institution. Okay? And you come back and you've got the content experts, which advancement is not the content expert, right? Not if it's nanotechnology, you get my point, or solving schizophrenia. You're not the content expert. But what you are is the person who's supposed to be able to kind of bring collectively these folks together to have a good conversation, to move this idea forward fast enough that you can capture that person's imagination and their passion in, relatively short order. Because, there's thousands of things competing for their attention as well as their money, right? And there's very few that want to walk through this journey with you slowly once they've found the thing they really want to do. So I've had at least 2 experiences where really significant, we're talking, 8-figure type conversation at least, where it took too much time on our side of the conversation to come back to the person, that the moment for the donor had passed. Not that they didn't still think it was important, but in the way we had, our inability to act fast had given them less confidence that we could really tackle aggressively what they wanted us to try to do. Does that make sense to you?
It makes total sense. And I think one of the most common, well-known adages in the sales world is time kills all deals.
Yep.
Time kills deals. Things change, external factors, market forces, somebody leaves when you've got, and it's a balance, because, the other side of that is overly pushy salespeople. But it's that balance of when the moment is right, responsiveness really matters, because we are competing for time and attention and focus. And especially, I think, in an environment, in a sector like philanthropy, which, I consider the ultimate discretionary, consumer discretionary purchase.
Right.
I think it's extra important to move when there's an opportunity. And I think we see that in times of tragedy, right? There's the emotional response and that visceral reaction to, I want to help. And then a month later, 3 months later, no matter what the tragedy, it's just not going to be as emotional. And I think there's probably, it sounds like, an equivalent version of that, even in more kind of thoughtful, structured major gifts. There's a time to plan, and then there's a time to move.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, like I said, it's sometimes, we want to get things so perfect, that it drives us not to be willing to admit that we don't have every answer. And I think that one of the things I'm learning, particularly with what I would call next generation kind of wealth, is they don't want us to have all the answers. In fact, they want to be part of that creative conversation, right? It's not like they want us to come and have the problem completely defined and the solution already dictated. And I think that is a different way for higher ed to think. Historically it's been, oh, you want to support this, or you want to solve that. We have the expertise to do that, not how can we work together? What is your thought? That kind of thing, or what have you. And I'm starting to see more and more kind of that demand to be a part of the concept or the creative process, but they wanted to move faster. So I'll go back to that first job I was telling you about at Emory. The provost that I worked for there, her name was Rebecca Chop, and she did a great favor to me very early on. And she just stepped down from being the president of the University of Denver, I think about a year and a half ago. She told me, she said, what took you 6 minutes in the consulting world will take you 6 days. What took you 6 days will take you 6 weeks. And what took you 6 weeks, I have no idea how long it will take in this environment. And she, wasn't specific to that. Her point to me was, you have to understand how different the environment is that you're in. And I think what's interesting, and I'm proposing to you today, is I think the outside world is going to force us to, instead of us trying to acclimate them to us, we're going to have to acclimate to them.
Yeah. Can I ask, when you were at Emory, did you cross paths with Jane DeFalco Parker?
I sure did. She's actually one of the people I still touch base with. She's retired. She did a great job leading Auburn through their big campaign, and she's loving living down there in retirement. But yeah, she and I have talked frequently. In fact, she was somebody I really, truly reconnected in a serious way with over COVID, because I had a little more time on my hands since I wasn't on trains, planes, and automobiles as much. And had a chance to really kind of tap her brain about, how to deal with, key management, leadership, and donor issues in a time of challenge like that. She was a great resource.
Yeah, I got to know Jane during her time at Auburn, and then she stayed engaged with AGB, the Association of Governing Boards. And so we got to connect in January at one of our kind of first in-person conferences in a couple of years. So figured that you all knew each other. And so at Vanderbilt, actually, I do want to just ask one question, because we do send podcast questionnaires and we try not to just read the questions, but you referenced something that stood out to me as being, on one hand, like so simple, yet so profound and hard to consistently execute. And it was the story that you shared about your first scholarship gift and having the opportunity to not just raise scholarship money, but it sounds like really keep the donor and student connected, and then yourself stay connected to the student to actually witness them go on to become a donor after they graduated. And I just feel like that should be very, very common, but it doesn't feel like it's all that common to really be able to close the loop in such a direct way.
Yeah. So you did, I think the question asked, what is a special gift that stands out in your mind? And it was probably the scholarship gifts in particular that I raised at Vanderbilt. We had a thing called Opportunity Vanderbilt. It was about eliminating student loans and debts from any part of the equation of them attending. And I had the good fortune to have a donor at the time who was based out of London, and she and her husband made a very specific gift for scholarship. And I got to watch them interact over a 4 or 5 year period of time with their first scholarship recipient. And I'm an unusual bird. I stayed at Vanderbilt 16 years. A lot of people move from university every 18 to 3-4 years to get more experience. I was there for a full 16. And this kind of happened at the beginning of my tenure there. Well, the young woman that was her scholarship recipient graduated, and I got to see her go on and become a teacher and start pursuing her master's degree. And obviously, her giving did not rise, immediately in any way to the level that her donors had that supported her. But the fact that, she left there and without us even needing to prompt her, said, I'm going to start trying to find a way to pay this back, to make sure I do some small touch to let someone else have the same opportunity I did, and she started making small annual gifts. And I think that's that's kind of the secret sauce, so to speak, of what we're trying to do, right? We all talk about, data analytics and acquisition. And there's all the stuff that drives, participation out there, but really capturing her imagination while she was on campus, getting her to have a relationship with her donor, making her understand just how critical that was to her own experience. She left there already saying, I will do something. I will do something to the best of my ability. You won't even have to ask. That's when you're doing it really well. So it was remarkable to see her succeed, and then to see her turn around and want to, foster that same opportunity for somebody else.
Well, and I think to me, it just makes me think about the difference between, your gift supports students like Jen
Mhm.
who dream of doing things like this.
Right.
And your gift will support Jen. And she grew up in Atlanta, and here's who she is.
Mhm.
And this is what she's dreaming to accomplish. And it's like, the closer you get to the center of the bullseye of real human to human connection, I feel as a donor, but as we think about this sector, the odds go up
Right.
that people are going to stretch. And I feel like it's just that it's like support our mission to support students like Jen to this is Jen.
Mhm.
And like the closer you can get to that, the better. And at the same time, I feel like we're just not there yet. I mean, one of my dreams as we have come together with Thankview has been like, what is the donor to student connection at scale
Mhm.
that maybe is never going to be quite as personal as it sounds like you were able to architect with this group in London and the
Mhm.
student. But we've done a lot of work thus far to sort of say, hey, student, send personal thank you to Brent, to show appreciation.
Right.
What about like, hey, Brent, send a thank you to Jen and
Mhm.
let her know as a donor why you support her. And it's like, how do we get a little bit more of that, not just student impact story, but the why behind the donor and get those kind of good vibes flowing back and forth. I just feel like there's so much potential to just drive even more consistent support if you can bring that kind of personal connection.
Yeah, no, anything you can do. And I do think Thankview and some of the other technologies we have been able to use, Zoom was, obviously it has its limitations, but I will say that one of the most effective things that we did during the kind of COVID period of time that we can't do in the normal setting of an academic year, we were able to hold really small group interactions where we had 2 or 3 students who were who were donor supported students that are, here studying different things, and then to bring 5 prospects into that small setting to have them just have a very personal interaction. And this is not the student they're yet supporting, but to your point, they got to know Sam, Susie and John very intimately over about a 45-50 minute period of time on Zoom. They got to share their own story of, when I was a student at UD 20 years ago here. So all of a sudden,
So
everything
cool.
you wanted to have happened, right? In the sense that, the donor, the prospect got to understand how dynamic the student is today. Also got to hear firsthand some of the challenges that they face because they are different than when they were here 15, 20, 30 years ago. The student now knows what it means potentially to be a donor and an engaged alum, and this guy runs this company, or he founded that particular product. You get my point. It was a great exercise. I can't load those 3 students up and take them to the 7 different alumni kind of heavy markets for us, right, in the middle of the school year. But they can give me 45 minutes on an afternoon or early evening to engage directly with those folks. And it was pretty remarkable how many people we were able to put in those kinds of settings who came away and said, I want to help. Not only do I want to make a gift, but I want to make sure that I'm connected with the Career Center to, my company has internships, that kind of stuff. And so, I do think you're right. There's that, the more personal we can make it, the more one-to-one in terms of someone really understanding that individual student story. And in this case, also that donor story, because the students were curious, who are you? And why would you do this? This is cool, but why would you, one of them asked, why do you give money away? It's so hard to earn it. Why would you ever give it away? And I thought it was a brilliant question. I mean, and, I think that goes to also just not over scripting the interactions that our donors have, with our students and with our campus partners. Because I think sometimes too, we also try to control that environment or script it so tightly. And some of that magic doesn't happen when you overthink it that way.
I think that's really well said. And I hope those are the kinds of experiences that as we do get pulled back into reunion planning or the event circuit, that we land in a balanced hybrid approach, because we've been given a gift of a once in a generation adoption of technology like Zoom. If you had tried to do that same event 3 years ago, the donors would have said, wait, what? I don't even know. I've got to download this thing. What is that? And so I do feel like we've got to get back on the road, but to not forget how much we've learned about the scalable hybrid interactions that just never were possible before. And so tell me just about the ultimate decision to accept the leadership opportunity, to pursue it and accept it at the University of Dayton. Dayton, Ohio, very different place than the Southeast for sure. And the accent's very different in Dayton, given my travels in the region. And so, but at the same time, I'm sure, there's commonalities just around the overall, mission and impact and the importance of institutions like the University of Dayton, in your region and in similar contexts throughout the country. So what inspired you?
Yeah, it was probably obviously the opportunity to lead your own team. I think when you've been in a position like I've been at Vanderbilt for quite some time, been through, a very extensive campaign, and then was setting up for the next, I think there was the challenge of, okay, I have had the good fortune to serve under 4 or 5 different chancellors and presidents, several different VPs. I kind of feel like I know what works. I know what maybe doesn't work and how my leadership style would be. And really unique opportunity presented itself. Was not looking to really be a number one in this kind of setting. But professional networks are some ways some of the best jobs come to you. And I had a great friend at Syracuse University who had been in fundraising, and she and I had known each other for about 15 years. And to tell you how small the world was, she had a new president at Syracuse, Kent Sarud, who was the law school dean at Vanderbilt previously. And she wanted to understand a little bit about how Kent worked. And so she called me up to get some advice on that. And as good friends would do, she said, well, I challenge you. What are you going to do next? Are you going to keep doing the same thing, or, kind of just stay there the rest of your career? And I said, I don't know. I'm not quite sure. And she said, well, our former provost just became president at the University of Dayton, and he's looking for someone to lead his advancement. And she said, I feel like I know your work style, the way you think. I know his personality and his values. I think the two of you would really, really connect well. And it's so much to say that it's history. So, when the president of Dayton says, people say, well, why did you come to Dayton? He always says, oh, she came for me. Actually, he's partly right. I came because it was a great institution. It's got a good research base. I love the rah-rah. So the fact that the Flyers are a great basketball team helps. But it was a place of mission. It was a place really focused on the whole person, and the idea that, they can get educated in terms of a vocation, not just a career. That was appealing to me as well. And like I said, it was really kind of, an opportunity to work with a first-time president who was trying to set a very different leadership tone. And I'll tell you the kind of the hook. It was the initial conversation that he and I had on the phone. And the first question that he asked me was not about the biggest gift that I had ever closed or the most prickly donor relations issue I had ever handled. Nothing about that, right? It was, if I give you this opportunity to lead a team, how will you start to set your leadership tone and your expectations of one another from day one? And I thought, okay, I'm listening. Because his assumption is I can do all of the tactical stuff. I can do that part of the job. He is most interested in bringing people around him that have similar core values, that put people first, that have high levels of accountability and connection with the work that they do. And I thought, okay, that really appeals to me. And I knew why it appealed to me, because I'd been in institutions where that had existed. And here was a chance to be the leader or the designer of the roadmap in that setting versus the one that kind of executed it or traveled it, if that makes sense to you. And so that was probably the biggest part of it was, okay, this is a place in which my leadership style will be valued. And I thought that meant enough to me at that point in my career.
I feel like the two words that have come up so much recently are trust and accountability. Because again, yeah, strategy, tactics, the plan, all of that only matters if you've got a leadership team and a team more broadly that trusts each other, but also has a high standard for accountability. And so would love to just know more about your perspective on that. And if there are things you've done or experienced that have worked well to foster trust and accountability, or if there are lessons learned where things haven't gone as well.
No, I think you're right. I mean, it's this kind of this balance right now, in particular, when you think about everything that the workforce went through over the last period of time, advancement and otherwise. You've got this need for, accountability and focus, and like you say, kind of, I would call the hard side of the business. I mean, because in the end, you have to have productivity and results, right? And then on the other side, there's this real need for trust and empathy and communication. Almost more so than ever before. And so how do you find the right balance in those, where you're not so tough that you're not hearing people, right? But that you're not spending so much time, worrying, about the empathetic side, that nothing gets done. And so it's an interesting balance. For me, really, I would say transparency has been the biggest thing. So I came into a setting here where there had been a lot of change. I was the fourth person to be VP in under 12 years. And so a lot of my long-term employees, of which at the time we had 68 folks, I'd say 2/3 of them had 5 to 8 years tenure or better. I mean, I had a lot of people that were 15 plus years. And, if you think about putting yourself in that situation, you've had 4 different people tell you what success looks like. 4 different people tell you what metrics are going to be evaluated. You get my point. And I thought, the key thing I need to do is to be really clear up front about what are we going to say is success? How are we going to be consistent about how we measure that together? When we run into challenges, can I get to a point where you'll really believe me when I say, if I know the answer and I can tell you, I will. If I don't know the answer, I'll go find the answer. And if I know the answer and I can't tell you in this moment, I'll be direct with you that that's actually the case. And I will come back to you when I can. And I think it was kind of that transparent way of saying, we're going to have to do things radically different. We're going to have to hold each other accountable. We're going to have certain expectations about our behavior, right? You can't be a major gift officer and raise $25 million and make 10 other employees world havoc for a year and still be rated exceptionally. It's great that you brought in that money, but if you made everybody else miserable and didn't follow the guidelines, that's a problem, so it was really kind of trying to navigate that space because, I came into that situation where it was like, I don't know if I can trust what I'm hearing because there's been so many of you in such a small amount of time. And I don't think that is unique to this shop. I mean, if you think about how transitory leadership is in even these senior positions, right? It really is hard to be a effective team member in some of these settings because it does feel like the goalpost is always getting moved or the field is getting redefined, to put it in sports terms. So that was kind of, for me, it was like, no, the changes we make, when we make them, we will make them because they're going to be part of our structure from now going forward. We might modify them slightly, but we're not going to do change for just change's sake. And I think that was having that clarity from day one and then just constantly communicating. Sometimes I feel like I've said the same thing like 20 times, and I probably have, but that's what's been more effective, at least in this setting.
No, I think that's really well said. It is a struggle. And I think, look, we just merged Evertrue and Thankview. Very similar missions, like serving the same markets, like have known each other for many years on the conference circuit. And it's been an incredible decision without a doubt, but it would almost be like if, one day you said, hey, great news team, like we decided that our missions are similar enough and together we can do more. And so we're going to bring together, University of Dayton and the University of Cincinnati. And work together. And it's like, what? Like that is on one hand, you could sort of see it on paper, like
Right.
similar region, lots of commonalities, lots of shared DNA, but then to actually do something like that and then build, trust and accountability in a fully remote context. It's hard but it is absolutely worth the challenge. And I think just like, you're experiencing at Dayton as you all kind of go through that, you've gone through that journey now. And my understanding is results are being generated and that there is momentum in spite of the challenges. It's just really kind of inspiring to see that, that it pays off. And I hope your team is feeling that as well. And maybe as we start to close here, you could just share a little bit about the momentum you have here in 2022. You had your reunion weekend last weekend. I mean, what was that like? How are you feeling? And for our audience's sake, it is June 17th. So we're just coming up on the end here of the fiscal year.
Yeah. So in a 6-week period of time, we did Giving Day, Senior Toast, Commencement for the class of 2022, our Board of Trustees meeting, graduation celebration for 2020, and then we did our first in-person reunion in 3 years. We had about 2,200 people on campus. So to tell you that my staff so that kind of ended the 6-week period of craziness, I guess, is my point of last weekend. To say that my staff on this Friday, 5 days later, is taking a deep breath would be correct. We are still, looking at the end of the fiscal year, but no, we really have. I mean, it's been energizing to get people back, to see them reconnect with each other. It was amazing last Saturday. It was pouring rain like monsoonal, but we're under a tent with 2,000 people and a band playing and lights. And, you could just see how appreciative they were of being back in a place that they love and to be with people that they really care about, and for our staff to know that they were a part of executing it. It was a huge win for a team that was remote for almost 2 years, as you said before, the other thing that has been really great is despite all the challenges of fiscal year 21, the stuff that we had built in 17, 18, 19, and even early 20. I mean, let's not forget that, things were flying pretty high around here in 2020. We had just won game day with Obi Toppin as our basketball player and, at ESPN on our campus. And 7 days later, we were shut down, from COVID. So we really went through a drastic kind of, moment where we really had momentum with us. And we've doubled the new commitments. We've brought in over 1,000 new volunteers to help. In fact, our Giving Day, that I talked about starting that 6-week period of action, and we had over 800 individuals, not staff, 800 volunteers that worked on behalf of our Giving Day, reaching out to their peers and so forth. We've really been able to kind of turn that whole conversation around, about what it means to be philanthropic, what it means to be engaged, what it means to participate. So I'm really proud of our team and the fact that they've shown this resiliency, and we're about to close out a record year. And that's a lot of reward. We had a great time earlier this week on Tuesday morning, just a quick stand-up meeting. You were talking about what is effective. I just basically invited everybody to a quick stand-up meeting to celebrate, the fact that we had really gotten through this period of time and to allow them to shout out and recognize each other. Because I think that's the thing. Sometimes we think leadership is the only people that can do that. And in fact, they really appreciated the fact that their peers understood the effort that they had put in and how hard it was to get back into that mindset and to be successful. So it's been a good run here. It's been a good run here.
Well, you mentioned earlier that you hadn't been during that real lockdown period on planes, trains, and automobiles. But it sounds like now you're on planes, trains, automobiles, and boats. Is that?
And boats, yes. So I have a lake weekend. You listen well, and we have one of our campaign leaders is holding a UD kind of, we call it a flyer porch party because we have porches on our houses that the students live here around a lake in Indiana for us. So we have about 15 couples that own homes around this particular lake, and we're going to get together and kind of be a big flyer family tomorrow. And then on Sunday, there's a boat race, which I have no idea what that entails. As long as I don't have to drive the boat or swim in the lake, we're good. If all I have to do is ride or cheer, I'm good, Brent.
I cannot even imagine what a alumni boat race would entail, but I have no doubt there will be video. So I look forward to learning
video
more.
or pictures for sure.
So and my understanding is, for all of the advances in technology that we've witnessed, building the list for this event was somewhat old school in nature. So your trustee essentially was driving around looking for University of Dayton flags and then taking down names.
So she was curious because she knew that she was aware and was good friends with a couple of fellow flyers who've graduated that have homes on the lake. And she noticed as she would take her boat around on different weekends that, everyone has a flagpole, has the American flag. And then for the most intents and purposes, has a flag for either a college team or, a pro team or what have you out as well, or on the back of their boat, those little flags on the backs of the boats and so forth. And she noticed that there were a lot more Dayton Flyer flags out than she had, knew was around her. So she went around and actually took down the house numbers of individuals that she saw with flyer gear and anything on their homes or their boats or what have you, and said, hey, let's see who these people are. So it will be really interesting. I wonder what, when we get there and we actually start talking as a group and celebrating and having fun, I have a feeling that a thread of this story will come out. So I'm not quite sure how people will feel about the idea that she was driving around on Sunday afternoons, trying to figure out who was who. But, however you get at it, in the end, most of the time flyers love other flyers. So I don't think it's going to be a problem, but it was definitely old school. Nothing like cleaning your database up that way.
I've heard of door-to-door fundraising, but boat to boat is next level. So I hope that it goes really, really well. And thank you so much for your time, Jen. I gotta give you an opportunity. Are you hiring? And if folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way? I know you've got an active LinkedIn profile. Any other recommended ways to reach out?
Yeah, no, I would definitely say, Brent, we would love to hear from folks if they'd like to be part of the flyer team. We've got a number of different positions that are open right now. Probably the ones that I'm most excited about are in our leadership annual giving team. This is a remarkable group of professionals that have just raised the bar. I mean, in terms of what they're doing and the pipeline they're building and the new people they've brought into conversations. They've exceeded their goals now 4 out of the last 5 years, and are just, fearless about how they go about their work. So if you like representing a really energetic campus, and you like being on the road and being out in front of people, this is kind of a group of folks that are just really making a huge difference. So love for them to reach out through LinkedIn profile. And then Jen Foster, she's also on LinkedIn. She's actually the head of that team. So I know she would welcome seeing any kind of interest on that, but that's the most exciting thing we have out there right now.
Love it. Well, I'd encourage everybody to reach out to Jen, mention that you heard her on the Raise podcast, and I look forward to continue to learn more about you and your team and your work, and hopefully seeing videos of this boat race. And so with that, Jen, I'll just say thank you for your time and congrats on the momentum and successes.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brent. It was a great time to talk.
All right, with that, Brent signing off with today's guest, Jen Howe from the University of Dayton. Take care, everybody.